Well, hi, everybody at home. I'm speaking to you live from my apartment in downtown Oakland. I'm here today to talk about progressive delivery, a subject which I am very, very, very excited about. So first, thank you very much to Spinnaker for inviting me to speak today. For myself, I'm Edith Harbaugh. I'm the co-founder and CEO of LaunchDarkly. LaunchDarkly is a feature management platform which has thousands of customers worldwide, and we serve trillions of feature flags every day. I'm co-host of To Be Continuous, a podcast about continuous delivery with Paul Bigger of Circle CI. And I'm also a contributing writer to Read Write InfoQ DZone. As for my background, I started off in engineering, and then I became a product manager. And from everything I saw on engineering and product, I went on to found LaunchDarkly. So let's skip back for a second to why progressive delivery matters and what is it. So, just in my lifetime has been this really, really rapid increase in the pace of technology. Technology used to take decades to get adopted widely. Now something like the smartphone can go from, just kind of a glint in Steve Jobs' eye to something that is widely adopted. So technology is moving faster and faster and faster. How does continuous delivery fit into that? So when I started off in software about 20 years ago, it was the heyday of the big release. The big release was something that Microsoft, I think, had the biggest one of, which was Windows 95, where you spend about 3 years building something, 1 year to plan it, 1 year to build it, 1 year to test it, and then you have this massive big release, including Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer getting up on stage and dancing to "Start Me Up" by the Rolling Stones. We don't see that anymore. And the reason why we don't see it anymore is that style of software development has a lot of issues. If you're spending 3 years building something, you're really likely to get it wrong or off kilter. It's hard to react, and it's hard to fix bugs. A bug could be on the field for a long, long time. So the idea of continuous delivery was to really change the style of development. Instead of having a release every 3 years, to make it so that releasing was quick, easy, and just something that you could just do. Instead of a release being something that you planned for months, why not be able to release every day? And then if the theory was, why can't you release every day? Then it would get to, why can't we release every hour and every minute even? So get into this really tight cycle of product owner thinks of something, developers build it, let's test it, let's deploy it, let's release. And this really led to a lot of companies like Facebook and Netflix being extremely successful. What's the problem, though? So a problem I saw when I was a product manager was that though we could release all the time, sometimes we didn't want to. You could have a feature that you are really excited about, that you think is a good idea, but that you really want to try to test with just a couple people. Maybe you want to just push it out to your QA and have them see if it works. Maybe you have a small beta group of testers who are your best customers who want to test it. Maybe you want to give it to your scalability team or your site reliability engineers first so that they can kind of really see it. So from continuous delivery kind of evolved progressive delivery. And what the idea of progressive delivery is that, yes, it's great to release all the time. And that is, I think, a necessary benefit that you have to have a robust software culture. But instead of pushing something out to everybody, which can be very, very, very destructive, why don't you try to push it out to limited groups of people slowly or quickly and get their reaction? So the two core areas of progressive delivery are release progression and delegation. So release progression goes by a lot of different names. I've also heard it called canary launches, betas, ring releases, but it's just the same basic idea that instead of pushing a release out to everybody, and I call that the push and pray release, because you're pushing out to everybody and then you're praying that nothing happens. Why don't you push it out to just the right people at the right time? So there's a lot of well-known best practices here. You can push it out to internal users. just to get feedback like, hey, are we on the right track? Is this what we wanted to do? You could then push it out to QA so they can really test in production and make sure that stuff works in real life. And then you could start to push out to, I call it the classic wave of your early adopters who are eager to see new features, and then your late adopters who are like, I don't want to see this thing until it is absolutely battle hardened. The second key part of this is delegation. If you say, hey, this is great, we can push stuff out to the right people at the right time, it's also empowering the right person in the org to do that pushing. Whether it be the product owner or a marketer, if they're running a beta and they want PR to see it at the right time, or if it's even the sales team, if they say we have a customer who really wants to try this new feature, and I want to turn it on for them without the developers having to run a release. So those are kind of the core ideas of progressive delivery. So we sum it up as deploy when you want, which is just being able to push whenever you want code, just push it. Don't wait for everything to be ready, but release it when your customer is ready. So it's this core idea of separating out deployment from release, where traditionally they've been so tightly intertwined that it's just been really hard to function as an engineering org, because it's like, well, if I finish this feature and I merge it into my mainline, it's going to just go out to everybody because we're doing continuous delivery. The idea of progressive delivery is that you can merge stuff in and then selectively control it. So this is an incredibly powerful concept, that you can suddenly have code that's deployed, but selectively on for different people. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So how Spinnaker fits into this. So I wrote a blog post in 2017 when Spinnaker first started getting popular, because my company LaunchDarkly does feature flags, feature management. And the talk back then was, well, with Spinnaker, you have all these great pipelines, and it's really easy to control pipelines that make stuff go faster out all the time, and you can control what box stuff goes to. Do we still need feature flags? Do we still need feature management? And my answer is absolutely yes. They are two things that go great together. If you have a reliable pipeline, like Spinnaker uses and LaunchDarkly uses internally, that can guarantee reliable delivery of code to different boxes, that is amazing. That is absolutely necessary. But then there's all sorts of nice techniques that Spinnaker has, where you could do load testing and failover between different boxes and make sure that everything works. You still need that next step of, okay, now that I have this rock solid guarantee that everything is where it needs to be, I still want to be able to control the actual features. And that's where feature management tools like LaunchDarkly or homegrown solutions come in. Is, okay, everything can get out where I want it to be in a safe, sustained manner. How do I then make sure that it is getting to the right person and the right functionality? So I'm going to walk through some use cases that we see people using Spinnaker and feature management together for progressive delivery. The number one is just really the mind swap of separating out deploy and release. If you could separate these two out, suddenly releases become really boring, which I like. I'm a boring person. I don't like stressful releases where your fingers are crossed and you're hoping that everything gets to the right place at the right time. I have a couple patents in deployment, and it was just all about just bundling up stuff and making sure it was delivered. That should be easy. That shouldn't be hard. So if you have guaranteed sense that you've deployed stuff, then you can get into the fun stuff of actually releasing it. Along with that, you can also do a lot of really cool use cases around test and production, which is if you can control who sees something in production, you have the ability to really battle test something in production. What I found over and over as an engineering manager is that no matter how much we test in QA, there would always be something in the real world that would change. So with progressive delivery, you can test in production and then quickly turn stuff off. Same with targeted rollouts and canary launches. You have really a lot of control to push stuff out to the right people Or if you find you've pushed it out to the wrong people, quickly turn it off. So we have a lot of, for example, customers who are in regulated industries where, for example, people in one province have to see something different than in another province. And progressive delivery really helps with that. Kill switches is such a killer feature. Sorry for my pun. I said I was a boring person. If you don't have a kill switch, a bad release is really, really painful. It means that you have to physically figure out what went wrong and redeploy it. Even if you're a pretty sharp dev shop, that can take a lot of time. So with a kill switch, you could just say, hey, something is not going right. Let me turn it off and then figure out what went wrong and fix it. I talked earlier about just the ability to learn. If you push something out to everybody all at once, what I discovered over and over in engineering product managers, sometimes you got it really wrong. You would have something that you thought was a great idea and it just flopped, which was really painful. With the ability to do beta groups, you can discover what's working, what's not, and iterate a couple more times. And finally, there's a lot of all at once use cases for more, I'd say, the business side. A really classic pain point when I was in engineering again was somebody would say, hey, we have this big important customer and they don't want this feature for some regulatory reason. And what that would mean without progressive delivery is we would have to go in and hard code it. So we would somewhere have sometimes even 2 branches, which was extremely, extremely painful. So with progressive delivery, you have the ability to say, hey, this customer doesn't get it, and that's okay. We're going to manage that. So again, progressive delivery helps, I'd say, primarily developers. Developers are the main benefit of it. But then there's so much of the rest of the org that also gets benefits from it. It's something that truly empowers everyone to more safely deliver and control their software. So in summary, Spinnaker and Feature Management really pack together this incredibly powerful use cases of deployment and release that are better together. If deployment is a hassle, and I dearly remember those days, and I'm glad they're gone. If deployment is a hassle, you get scared to deploy. If every time you deploy, you're worried that something is going to break and you're going to have a 5-hour build party to figure out why something didn't deploy, you don't release very often. If you have the ability to safely and easily deploy regularly, that gives you a lot of confidence to move quicker and saves time. Then the next part of that is if you do have that, then you can release when your customer is ready. You could do things like, hey, we have this really important feature that's coming out next week, and it's already ready to go. We deployed it. That's not the nervous part. All we have to do next week is just flip the switch and turn it on for our customers. So again, this is super, super powerful. And I think it's a really needed step in software delivery. And that's why we're calling it progressive delivery. So I want to leave time for questions at the end. I mentioned that I had written a blog. There's a link to it. If you'd like these slides, there's also a link there. You could go there and download the slides.
Well, I have a question. I guess I went to the last time I heard about progressive delivery was at Delivery Conf, and I heard a talk from LinkedIn about progressive delivery, and I've had a few more talks around. I think LinkedIn's delivery strategy is interesting, so we can or cannot talk about that. But I'm just wondering, do you have any can you talk about how enterprises are using this and talk a little bit more about how that's kind of supported their business goals and how that's kind of different for each? Because every SDLC is a snowflake, right? So how does LaunchDarkly deal with that?
Yeah, I'd say enterprises, I'd say initially we're very resistant continuous delivery because it doesn't fit their business patterns. Like a Facebook or a LinkedIn, with millions of consumer customers can afford to push stuff, hundreds or thousands of times a day. If you're a bank or a financial institution, you can't do that. You're in a regulated industry and there might be training involved. So real examples we heard of we can't update this more than once a week because we have to retrain everybody all the tellers or all the call center people who use that. So banks and financial institutions and airlines really love progressive delivery because it's like, okay, we get all the benefits of continuous delivery, of being able to iterate quicker, being able to have more stuff ready to go. But we can use progressive delivery to have the gates we need to have it fit back into our own business patterns.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And we got another great question from the audience. If you kill switch a feature, how should the other areas of the platform cope? Do you preemptively plan for this? So he wants to know a little bit more about the details on that kill switch feature.
Yeah. I mean, it's a shift in thinking of, I hate to say the word microservices because that's so loaded at this point, but it's a shift in thinking of making sure that your code is wrapped as a feature so that if you do kill something or turn it off, that everything else gracefully degrades. Again, to go back to the banking example, because we have a lot of banking customers, if some backend system is sometimes a little bit flaky, and that if it doesn't get a response, it might bring down your entire system. You want to gracefully wrap that. So say if a mortgage rate isn't coming in when you expect it to, your entire lending app doesn't fall over. So that's just, it just requires some thinking about how you're going to handle it and having that safeguard. What we found over and over is that our customers just start to think that way. Even before the build, but just in the design, they're like, how do we wrap this so that it can safely fail? Which is definitely a mind shift.
Gotcha. That is a good, yeah, it is a mind shift. And it's really a whole shift. Just talking about this with Kelsey earlier too, like it's a shift in the way that you think about engineering your software and the way you think about quality kind of, and how you can isolate it, right?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I'll quickly say, because I know we're right at time, is people think, well, if I have features everywhere, that means that people aren't caring about quality. No, you absolutely are still caring about quality. You're just designing it in from the very beginning of, okay, if this fails, how can I recover? Instead of having the assumption that nothing will ever fail, so I don't have to think about this.
Right. Well, that's a good soundbite to end with. Thank you so much, Edith. Thank you so much for your talk and for sharing the LaunchDarkly story with us. And we're like I said, we're so excited that not only does do LaunchDarkly and Spinnaker work really well together for our customers' SDLCs, but also LaunchDarkly uses the Armory distro of Spinnaker internally to deliver their products. So we're just like eating our own dog food and drinking our own Kool-Aid all over the place and loving each other so much. So looking forward to continuing to innovate with you and look up to you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me today.
Yes.